Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Season 4, Episode 10. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
We're talking cornerbacks today, a position in which the Steelers really struggled at last season, particularly Artie Burns and the starting position across from Joe Hayden. They've signed Steven Nelson to address that, but there's still certainly the possibility the Steelers address it in the draft, and we'll have 10 different cornerback prospects to look at today. So we'll have you covered as far as a bunch of different potential targets. So before we get into that, just some news and notes to get to. The NFL released its preseason schedule today. The Steelers obviously hosting 2 games and on the road for 2 games. They're hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Kansas City Chiefs on August 9th and 17th, respectively, at 7:30 p.m. Those are Week 1 and 2 of the preseason. Then Week 3, they're at Tennessee playing the Titans. Last year, you might remember they hosted the Titans in Week 3 of the preseason. This time, they're in Tennessee on August 25th at 8 p.m., and then they wrap up the preseason as they typically do against the Panthers, this time on the road on August 29th. Any thoughts on the preseason?
Nope, it's pretty much the same as usual. There's a game against the Titans and the Panthers, which basically happens every single offseason. And then, nothing really interesting. Kansas City is on there, and Tampa Bay. The preseason isn't that interesting. Not much to really talk about until after the draft.
Is there any chance we see Patrick Mahomes Week 2?
No.
The Steelers have signed former defensive end Casey Sayles. Sayles, as you might remember, was a Pittsburgh Steeler last season. He was with the team throughout the preseason, but was released prior to the start of the regular season in roster cutdowns. He entered the NFL as an undrafted rookie free agent from Ohio and was with the Rams after the 2017 draft and was released prior to that season. So he hadn't been able to latch on anywhere, and most recently played for the Birmingham Iron of the AAF and played pretty well there, was one of the top PFF graded players on the Irons defense. And after a solid stint there, the Steelers have re-signed him to add to their defensive line depth. Do you think he can make the roster?
I think he definitely has a shot. I mean, I thought he has a shot last year. No LT Walton this year to compete with, so he's going to be competing with Levon Hooks and Connor Sheehy and likely a draft pick for like one of those final spots. So I think he definitely stands a chance.
I definitely like his chances as well. All right, and then the big news to get to is, again, Antonio Brown has been traded. He has his new deal, and yet we're still talking about him, Austin. Why is that?
Well, AB tweeted out, I think it was 3 days ago now, don't put your emotions on the internet. 2 hours later, a fan tweets Antonio Brown a picture of Juju winning team MVP in response, and AB responds, emotions. Boy fumbled the whole postseason in the biggest game of the year. There's more to the quote, but it's mostly jumble. I really don't understand Antonio Brown's tweets. It doesn't matter. That was the big sentence. That's all you really needed to know. Juju responded by first tweeting, "Keep your emotions off the internet," to quote what Antonio Brown put out like 2 hours prior. And then he put out a statement, "All I ever did was show that man love and respect from the moment I got to the league. I was genuinely happy for him, too, when he got traded to Oakland with a big contract. And now he takes shots at me on social media." And then he puts out 2 more tweets after that. The first one is, "Crazy how big that ego got to be to take shots at people who show you love." Shaking my head. Then the last tweet is just a quote from Mark Twain with the caption, "Shaking my head." Again, "Never argue with a fool. Onlookers may not be able to tell the difference." And that's Mark Twain quote. And that's essentially what the whole entire beef was, as Antonio Brown basically took shots at Juju for no good reason. A fan tweeted it. It wasn't like Juju said, "Yeah, Antonio Brown's trash." And Antonio Brown, in his super brain, is so intelligent. His intelligence is so high. He tweeted out the Instagram picture, I've actually seen it before. It wasn't news, but he decided to put on Instagram the DM that Juju Smith-Schuster sent him in 2015, and Juju basically came to him in the DMs and was like, "Hey man, like I'm a guy from the University of South Carolina. I respect your game, and I really want to get better. So, like, do you have any tips for me?" And for some reason, Antonio Brown, with his big brain, thought this was debilitating. This is really what's going to make Juju Smith-Schuster look bad here. A man asking for help as a youngin', he was in college. It wasn't even his draft year. It was 2015. He was just looking to improve his game, and he came respectfully and just asking for help. And apparently Antonio Brown thought that was a good idea at first. He since deleted it because he got roasted to hell. I also should say Juju Smith-Schuster absolutely bodied him in terms of, like, Twitter and such. Like, his favorites compared to Antonio Brown's favorites and retweets was out of this world. He got 213,000 favorites on his reply to Antonio Brown. He absolutely, in terms of that, he bodied him. And as of most recently, Antonio Brown tweeted out, "He's not giving you media fakes no more ammo. Enjoy my name, AD. I'm in Cali living ready to ball, no nonsense. You troll is troll. Too good to worry." Too good to worry. He just used the wrong two. I'm sorry. That's why I mispronounced it. And then hashtag call God. So that was after he deleted the Instagram post. So after everyone roasted him for being really, really, really stupid, essentially he just kind of backtracked and said he's now going to stay off the internet, which I highly doubt. And this just makes me so much more excited for how he's going to react when the season starts and he has Derek Carr throwing him the ball. And it's really going to be fun when he first blows up on Derek Carr. It's really going to be enjoyable. And as the days go on, this trade gets better and better, to be honest. Do you have any comments on this?
I enjoy watching him open his mouth and tweet now, because every time he does something stupid, which is usually whenever he does tweet, it makes, again, public perception shifts closer and closer to the way we have seen things from the start, and many people that cover the Steelers have seen, is that AB is just a clown at the end of the day. And I don't know, I've thought for a while now, I think has some sort of brain problem. I don't know if he necessarily has CTE, but I mean, I don't know if he's borderline. He seems borderline insane at the end of the day. I don't know what exactly happened, but he definitely seems to be off the deep end. I don't know what made him think that posting that direct message with Juju Smith-Schuster would have made him look good in any light, but he just chose to do it. And the best part about him talking about not giving the fake media types any more ammo is just the irony that he provided all the ammo himself. And it's just, I don't know, man. It's great knowing that he's not our problem anymore.
Yeah, he's not the brightest, and it just keeps looking like it's addition by subtraction here. And it looks like the Steelers have made the right move, even if it didn't seem like it was good enough compensation by the minute. It's feeling a little bit better as time goes on, as he makes himself look even more stupid.
Not that we've ever taken a lot of national pundits seriously based on what they've said regarding the Steelers and the Antonio Brown situation, but I have to admit it is kind of nice seeing some of the national media finally coming around to our end of it and realizing that Brown is really just a nutcase.
Yeah, it's great, too, because NFL players even stepped up and kind of called him nuts. Like, Eric Weddle said he lost respect for him, the safety for the Rams. The safety for the Texans, Justin Reed, came up and said, "Man, the disrespect is terrible. I can't wait to hit this guy." The Texans played the Raiders this year, and he's talking about Antonio Brown. Zach Banner of the Steelers actually came out and said, "I support my mans. I'm behind Juju 100%." And he said that. And really, most players were behind Juju. I mean, I was kind of upset because one of my favorite players on another team, Michael Thomas, was like favoriting all the Antonio Brown stuff. So, I mean, I guess not everyone's with Juju there, but still, I feel like I feel like as general consensus, a lot of people have lost respect for Antonio Brown after this because the attack was senseless. It was for no reason. It wasn't Juju's fault. Juju didn't do anything. He's done nothing but treat Antonio Brown with respect. But it's jealousy. It's insane jealousy that Juju Smith-Schuster was the future, and Antonio Brown didn't like that.
And furthermore, he was criticizing Smith-Schuster for fumbling in that moment, and Smith-Schuster took all the blame in that moment. Meanwhile, Brown skipped out on the season finale.
Yeah, he's not the brightest either. And what made me laugh about that is people came correct. They came straight for Antonio Brown's neck after that because obviously Antonio Brown didn't really get blamed for much in his career because he was such a good receiver, but people came at him with the Dolphins game where he ran out of bounds and it caused him to miss the playoffs. They came out at him with the Jets game where he fumbled twice and they missed the playoffs that year by one game. And then when he fumbled against the Cowboys, which let them come back, and I believe in the 2013 season, and they also missed the playoffs that year by one game, and people came correct, straight for Antonio Brown's neck. It was great. He got roasted to heck on Twitter.
All right, so let's segue from the Antonio Brown news once again to a few more signings. We talked about Casey Sales, several other AAF players, including a standout from your favorite team, the San Diego Fleet, have signed.
Yes, so we got cornerback/wide receiver. I think he's going to be a cornerback, though. Cameron Kelly, formerly of the San Diego Fleet. Linebacker J.T. Jones, formerly of the Atlanta Legends. And defensive tackle Winston Craig, formerly of the San Antonio Commanders. All of these guys had at least spent some time with NFL teams as well before the AAF. Kelly was in camp with the Cowboys. J.T. Jones was on the Falcons practice squad. And Winston Craig was with the Eagles the past two off seasons. And so we're now up to like a total of 30 guys from the AAF having NFL jobs now, at least momentarily. So we keep seeing it. And the Steelers are one of the top teams for it. The Steelers have employed some of the most AAF players now.
So now that we've looked at all that, the Steelers have quite a crowded cornerback room as of today. They have, 10 cornerbacks on the team, and I'd be shocked if they carried more than 6 during the regular season. I guess, first of all, Cody Sensabaugh is a free agent that hasn't been signed. To my knowledge, he's still available. Do you think I don't think the Steelers are bringing him back at this point.
No, I think they have way too much in their cornerback room, and I think that they're still even going to address it in the draft. So I feel like Cody Sensabaugh is going to remain a free agent until maybe I don't know if he's waiting because he just wants to see if better offers come or if he's not getting any offers. I feel like he's not getting any offers. So it's kind of sad. I thought that Sensabaugh ended the season really well. But I feel like he could come back in case of an injury later in the season to Pittsburgh. But I don't see Sensabaugh getting signed right now.
So right now the starters are in place in Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson, right?
Oh, yeah. It's Joe Hayden and Steven Nelson for sure, at least for this year.
And then Mike Hilton in the slot. So behind them is really where the questions lie, specifically behind Hayden and Nelson regarding whether it be Artie Burns or Cameron Sutton or Brian Allen or one of the other guys that have been signed and a potential draft pick. So if it comes down to, let's just say, you've got Hayden, Nelson, and Hilton, that's 3. Let's say they're keeping 6. So you've got Sutton, Burns, Allen, and a draft pick. Who is the odd man out between Sutton, Burns, Allen, the odd man out between Sutton, Burns, and Allen, because you're not going to cut the draft pick, let's just say, for the sake of the argument?
I think it's Artie Burns because he's the most expensive, and while he provides special teams ability, he doesn't provide the special teams ability that Sutton and Allen bring, and they're both cheaper. So I think that Artie Burns is at most risk, but Brian Allen's not far behind. I think Cameron Sutton is the least risk out of the 3, but I think Artie Burns and Brian Allen are going to be the ones really fighting for their roster spots this year.
I 100% agree with you on that. A lot of it will come down to special teams. Is there any chance that Artie Burns can turn it around at all, even be at least a marginal player?
Nah, I think his ship has sailed. I think after 3 years, we know what kind of player he is, and it's just he's detrimental. He could be a good number 4 guy, number 5 guy, possibly, but I can't really see him more than that. And he needs to improve his special teams potential for me to really say that he should stick around. And it has to be a pretty cheap price because he would only be like a special teams player and depth option that you don't want to see out in the field.
Whatever he is, he's not going to be that in Pittsburgh.
I agree 100%.
So Cameron Sutton, what is he? We've been hearing for so long about what a smart player he is, and we've seen very, very little on the field. Not necessarily bad, but just not much of him on the field, period.
Yeah, I wanted to see more out of Sutton. I really thought that he was going to be the next greatest thing. Like, not like super great, but like I thought he was going to be a good cornerback and he was eventually going to be able to get some more playing time, but it felt like it never came. Like you said, it just, he never really got out on the field, and that concerns me. And then, I mean, some of his special teams abilities got taken away. When he was drafted, he was a really good returner, but that never came into fruition. When he got tested in like the preseason, he wasn't very good at it at the NFL level. So, I mean, Sutton's interesting. Like, I always thought, when we first saw him, I thought he was going to turn out okay. He was hurt at first, and then he came in and was doing decently, but he's at risk of losing his roster spot as well. Not as much. I feel like because he offers a cheap deal for one more season after this next one, I feel like the Steelers are going to hold on to him. But like, I feel like he hasn't stepped up. He hasn't taken that leap that like we thought he was going to take. Is the best way to say it.
It's just frustrating because we're talking about three guys that could be one of them could be the odd man out. And all three of them are guys that have been drafted within the last two drafts.
Yeah, it's just a shame. The Steelers just aren't good at drafting cornerback. They're really good at drafting wide receivers. And on the opposite side, they're really bad at drafting cornerback.
So with that in mind, let's just talk about how important it is to address this position. Because Steven Nelson's obviously been signed. They've gotten outside help. But... we just talked about the struggles in the draft. Is there really credence to the Steelers potentially taking one early or taking one at all? Because if they don't take one early, is there even a point in taking one?
I actually think that you could take a day 2 corner and it'd be okay. But my problem is I think you still need to take a corner regardless here because out of the, 10 cornerbacks here, while Jack Tocho or Tacho, I don't actually know how to say his name, and Cameron Kelly, their deals are unknown at this time. I think we can assume they're on one-year deals. So out of the 10 cornerbacks that are currently in this room, only 2 are on multi-year deals. So that's Steven Nelson, who has 3 more years, and Cameron Sutton, who has 2 more years. I mean, Mike Hilton, I think, is a restricted free. Yeah, Mike Hilton's a restricted free agent in 2020, so I guess he's got 2 years left as well. But that leaves you 3 cornerbacks if you don't extend Hayden or Artie Burns or Brian Allen and all that. So I think that no matter what, you still need a cornerback that's gonna for later on because I can't imagine. I can't imagine most of these guys being brought back. Like Marcellus Branch, I don't think he comes back. Herb Waters, I doubt it. Tacho might be used as a safety as well. He might not even be a corner. He was a corner for the Iron, but he might be used as a safety. And Cameron Kelly also might be used as a wide receiver, even though I think he's going to be a cornerback. I don't feel strongly about this group, and there's not a lot of time left with these group of people anyway. So I think that addressing corner, and relatively early too, because again, I think you could go all the way to the 5th round and get a corner that's replacing one on this draft. Because right now, Brian Allen was a 5th round pick, and he's kind of like, he's degraded in my mind to like worth a 7th. Artie Burns was a 1st, and he's down to like a 7th as well. It's just like, so in my mind, if you're drafting a 5th, you're getting someone better than Brian Allen or Artie Burns right now. So I feel like you get to the 5th, and it'd still be good. I might be exaggerating a little. That's why I said 5th. So like maybe it's more like Burns and Allen are like 6th round picks, but. And then Sutton to me is downgraded to like a 4th round pick. So like all these guys, I think, can be replaced with a little bit higher draft pick. So I do think it's important to draft a corner in this draft. What do you think?
Well, extending Joe Hayden has to be a top priority right now.
You gotta hope. You gotta hope he wants to come back and such.
I would have to imagine he wants to come back. I think he likes it in Pittsburgh. And after spending his whole career in Cleveland, I think it'd be pretty hard to want to leave Pittsburgh after something like that.
You never know. Maybe he wants a reunion now that Browns are supposed to be getting better.
We'll see, but I think the Steelers are going to get an extension done with him sometime in the coming months. But regardless, there is question marks, so it is a high position of need. So that being the case, as we mentioned before, we have 10 different guys that we're looking at today. Austin, how many of your guys would you consider kind of high-round guys? I had a good mix of a couple early-round guys, a couple mid-round guys, a late-round, a likely late to possibly undrafted guy. I'll list my players in a moment, but I wanted you to kind of overview your prospects and then list them for our audience, please.
Sure. So all my guys are about within the top 7. Five of them are within the top 7. I don't have every single one. You obviously have one of them. We'll get to that in a second. But who I do have is Byron Murphy. Then after Byron Murphy, I got Julian Love. Then after Julian Love is Rocky Sin. After Rocky Sin, it's Trayvon Mullen. Also, correct me every time I say Mullins. I don't know why. Every time I looked at this guy's name, I wanted to call him Mullins. There's no S. It's just Trayvon Mullen. Then my last one is DeAndre Baker. So who are your prospects?
I have the highly touted Greedy Williams from LSU, followed by Justin Lane from Michigan State, David Long from Michigan, Mike Jackson from Miami, and finally Derek Beatty from Kentucky. Those are my 5 cornerbacks. So now that we've talked and listed all 10 of them, let's start talking about Byron Murphy from Washington then.
Sure, he is 5'11", 190 pounds. And for those of you not keeping track at home, Byron Murphy is my 3rd straight Washington prospect I've looked at now after looking at safety Taylor Rapp and tight end Drew Sample in the past 2 episodes. Murphy came out of high school as an All-American receiver, having over 1,700 yards and 21 touchdowns at his high school in Phoenix, and also was a finalist for an award for the top defensive back in high school for his 7 interceptions. As you could probably tell, he was considered a top 100 recruit and decided to play cornerback with Washington. He redshirted his first year, but still won the team's Defensive Scout Player of the Year for his work at practice. Side note, after doing 3 straight Huskies, I've noticed that they hand out a bunch of awards for just like random things, and it's strange to me. But anyhow, moving along to his freshman year, he was able to start the first 3 games before breaking his foot in practice and missing the next 7, still getting to play against Arizona and Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. In his sophomore season, he earned himself first-team All-Pac-12 and second-team Associated Press All-American accolades for 58 tackles, 4 for a loss, and led the Huskies with 4 interceptions, including a pick-6 to his 13th start. Murphy decided to forego both his junior and senior seasons to declare for the draft early. But just one more little fun fact about Murphy. In PFF's last 2-round mock draft, it had the Steelers selecting Byron Murphy in the first and Arizona State receiver N'Keal Harry in the second. And what's interesting about that is they went to the same high school together and are still very close friends. So I just thought that was a cool little thing that I saw in the mock draft recently. So getting to Byron Murphy's positive, a stat that interested me when looking at Murphy is that he has made a play on 31% of his targeted throws. Whether it be a forced fumble, interception, or pass breakup, almost a third of the time Murphy was being targeted, he made a big play. Just look at his stats. He's been targeted 87 times in his college career and has 7 interceptions and 20 pass breakups. Man doesn't play. I think what helps him the most are his high football IQ, instincts, and body control that help him track the ball so he can go and make a play. He's also been coached into keeping his eyes on the cornerback, so this helps him as well. Then for a corner, he's actually pretty tough. I saw Murphy lay out guys more than once, hit sticking like he's a safety out there. Combining his toughness with his twitchy feet and movement, and NFL teams could probably consider using him at the nickel spot. Last thing I'll say is that he's a very competitive guy that isn't afraid to give his all in run support. So flipping to the other side, while Murphy mostly played the outside in college, he lacks the ideal height, weight, and speed to do so at the NFL level. So he may have to readjust to be a nickel or slot corner. Then he doesn't have the most experience. He's only played in 20 career games and declared after his sophomore season. He offers a lot of upside, but teams would have liked to see one more season out of him, I would think at least. Now, in coverage, my biggest issue with Murphy is his footwork. It's below average, and he's got a bumpy back pedal with no fluidity. And this has often gotten him to be beat on a receiver's release and then causes him to grab and hitch on a receiver to try and make up for it because he doesn't have that great recovery burst either. Speaking of grabbing and receivers, Murphy really struggles to get off of receivers blocking both the run and pass game. I saw a couple wide receiver screens where he was kept out of play so he could do with a little bit more strength, or again, maybe even just some weight could help him. Then Murphy performed in the bottom half of the vertical jump, getting only 36.5 inches, and this hurts him when he's already short. I was kind of hoping he would outperform what scouts were expecting here, but he didn't. He tied for the 8th worst. The last thing I'll say is that sometimes he comes in too fast, and this has caused him to overrun his target at times. So, bottom line is, before I did any research into anything, and also before the Steelers signed Steven Nelson, Byron Murphy was my first draft while as in the past, I've loved defensive backs out of Washington like Marcus Peters, Sidney Jones, and Budda Baker. Now, after finally getting a look at him, I really do like him. I personally am not concerned with his lack of experience, as the dude is a playmaker and proved to me how good he is on the 87 targets he had in those 20 games played. I also watched a guy like Dwayne Haskins avoiding his side of the field in the Ohio State game because he just plays so well. Still, though, Manza's pretty small and has earned him comparison to Brent Grimes, which I think is unfair. Their play style wasn't really the same to me. But yeah, Murphy is kind of small. If he could just work on his footwork, though, he's going to stick around in this league a while like Grimes did. So, as for draft position, I think Murphy is going to be the first cornerback off the board. I think he's going to fall out of the top 12, though. I think he's going to be somewhere inside the top 30. I can't see him sleeping out of the first round, but I feel like there's a lot of risk here. So my final answer is somewhere between picks 12 and 30, if I were to guess. Just a fun fact, though, note, if Byron Murphy is, in fact, drafted in the first round, he is going to be the slowest cornerback drafted in the first round since at least 2013. He ran a 4.55 40-yard dash, and the next slowest time within the last 5 years was 4.52, taken in the first round. So, 4.53. I was off by a little bit. So he's 0.02 slower than the slowest guy taken in the first round in the last 5 years. So that's just something interesting to think about. But that was Byron Murphy out of Washington. Let's hear about Greedy Williams out of LSU.
Greedy Williams is 6'2" and 185-pound junior. I watched his games against Ole Miss, Auburn, and Georgia from this past season. Was an All-Louisiana selection in his senior year of high school and was a 4-star recruit. Actually played youth football with his teammate and other NFL prospect Devin White, who I'm sure we'll be talking about later on this month. He intercepted a pass in his very first collegiate start and then started every game the rest of that season, and then finished with 38 tackles and 6 interceptions that season, which led the SEC, had 11 pass breakups and was named first-team All-SEC and third-team All-American, and followed up that 2017 season with another great 2018 season, finishing with the first-team All-SEC honors, second-team All-American, and 12 starts with 2 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, and 33 tackles. So Greedy Williams, when you turn on the tape, the first thing you'll notice right away is that he's tall and he's long and he uses his length to his advantage. He uses his arms to slow down receivers trying to get into his route. He's patient at the start of a play in press coverage, and he'll wait for the receiver to kind of make a move so he's not caught out of position. He'll make his move off of what the receiver does. Kind of a good cat and mouse game waiting for the receiver to play his hand. He has excellent balance and agility. Greedy Williams can turn on a dime, and he won't lose any speed doing so. He matches other receivers with quick feet and rarely gets left in the dust. His smooth hips allow for a quick transition from a back pedal to a full-out sprint, and it doesn't seem like he's doing so with much effort. Great body positioning up the sideline. Williams will kind of force the receiver subtly closer to the sideline, making completions harder and harder. Greedy Williams only started for 2 years at LSU, but had 8 interceptions in that time. And when he does play in zone, he usually plays in man, but when he is in zone coverage, he will use his eyes to his advantage and makes good reads on the quarterback, the wide receiver, or the ball. So he'll also do a good job of kind of making sure that he's got his eyes on the receiver and he knows when to turn around and look for the ball, and he does a good job of finding the ball. Greedy Williams has good long strides to cut down on windows quickly. and his arms give him the chance to rake the ball away from defenders. It was seen on tape several times. I watched the game against Ole Miss this year where he went up against another top NFL prospect in DK Metcalf, and he covered Metcalf for most of the game. Metcalf had just 3 catches for 37 yards and what was a winning effort for the LSU Tigers. And the thing I noticed about Williams is that he was just rarely out of position in the 3 games I watched. And he looked comfortable in zone, but he was definitely much better in man coverage, which LSU ran most of the time. Greedy Williams, unfortunately, though, I noticed he mostly plays only the left side. Against Ole Miss, he only played on the left side, and at only 185 pounds, he could stand to add more muscle. Bigger receivers are going to be able to push him around a little bit. I noticed Greedy Williams' kind of biggest weakness in man coverage is covering crossing routes. He'll grab at receivers a lot, and he got away with it in college, but against better competition, I think he'll be more prone to doing it, which will lead to more penalties. He plays receivers' hands instead of the football, which we know, based on what Artie Burns has done in his career, that's a dangerous game. He's also, this is probably the big thing with Greedy Williams, is he's not an aggressive tackler, he's not involved in the run game, he's not a physical player, period, and people have questioned his desire and interest on tape, which is always a concern and red flag in my mind. But Williams is just, he's the kind of run defender that is so, unwilling to assist in it that big runs are going to happen because he's not getting involved. A play will continue to go on, he'll think the play will be over, and the running back will eventually break free and he'll keep going, and it'll be because a guy like Greedy Williams didn't help out. And furthermore, when it comes to getting off of blocks to try to make tackles in the run game or try to make tackle on a receiver screen, he doesn't do it well. So he's virtually useless in terms of run support, and he's not much of a help in tackling receivers in the open field either. So that's concerning. So at the end of the day, Greedy Williams is really the ideal press man cover cornerback in the modern NFL. He's long, athletic, and has fluid movement, and he has tools that you want to see out of an NFL cornerback with experience and ball production that should make him an early draft pick, possibly even the first cornerback taken in the draft. I think it's not going to be him, but it is possible. He needs to be a much better tackler, and he needs to stop grabbing as much. But the good thing about Greedy Williams is that he rarely is out of position, and most of the time he'll fight for the ball when it is thrown towards him. So I think that Williams projects as a solid cover cornerback in the NFL, but I think in order for him to become a legit number 1 guy, he needs to be a little more reliable in terms of tackling, fighting off blocks, and helping out in the run game, because otherwise teams are just going to throw screens at him all day and wear him down, and he's not going to want to have any part of that, to be honest with you. So Greedy Williams is an interesting prospect. I liked some parts of his game, but there are certainly other things that could use some work. So that being said, let's transition to your second prospect, Julian Love.
Well, Julian Love is out of Notre Dame. He's 5'11" and 195 pounds. He grew up around the Chicago area and got to see plenty of Notre Dame games with his dad growing up. Like Murphy, he was a crazy force on offense as well as defense, but Love played running back rather than receiver. His high school team won state titles in both his junior and senior season, and once he was done, he decided to join the Fighting Irish. As a true freshman, he was able to start the last 8 games of the season while playing in all 12 and got 45 tackles, including 2 for a loss, 1 interception, and 3 pass breakups. In 2017, he started all 13 games and was an absolute monster at breaking up passes, ranking 2nd in the FBS in breakups with 20, which was also a school record. He also got 68 tackles and 3 interceptions, with 2 of them being pick sixes. In 2018, Love was a finalist for the Jim Thorpe Award, the award for the best defensive back in college football, for ranking in the top 10 for pass breakups with 16, 63 tackles, 3 being for a loss, 1 interception, and 3 fumble recoveries through his 13 starts, and possibly could have had an even higher stats if he didn't suffer a head injury in the playoff game against Clemson. Feeling like he proved himself enough, Love decided to forego his senior season and declare for the NFL draft. So, Love is one of the best cover corners in this draft, hands down. He is just so good at sticking close to a route, it's ridiculous. Just watching him, you can see he has a high football IQ because he's just so instinctive that he anticipates what routes can be run and runs it for the wideout. He also is quick to process and respond to what's happening, mirroring and matching what his man is doing with his quick feet. He's really shown to be good in both man and zone coverage at the college level, offering a consistent level of coverage in either or. he's always been tight in coverage, and it's helped him so much with his pass breakup game. I mean, you don't get 20 pass breakups in the season being far from the ball. Basically, teams throwing at him are trying to throw it into a tight window every single time. And with all of Love's practice, he's been able to break up 32 passes and get 4 interceptions in the last 2 years, and that's impressive. With how much he's practiced dislodging the ball, he offers different ways of getting away from this man, either by dislodging it with some force or raking at it. And Love may be great at forcing fumbles because of it. He can also throw himself in front of the catch point to make plays that way as well. So then the last thing I'll say, he's got really good body control. He's considered a high-level technician by analysts. So my biggest issue with Love is really going to be centered around his combine. I already mentioned that most of my corners didn't have a good combine, or actually I might have forgotten to say that. Well, all my corners didn't really have a good combine. Almost all of them were middle of the pack, and when they did good, they had something bad to bring their combine performance down. And these guys are all considered the top, so it was really interesting to me. But anyway, he tied for 6th worst vertical, while his bench press was just average. You could do with some more strength. I think he's going to struggle against some of the bigger guys in the NFL at the catch point because he really can't get up there. He isn't the tallest, and he isn't really the strongest either. He's definitely going to get worked by blocks on the next level too. Watching him on some plays getting blocked, I was getting flashbacks from the first videos of Artie Burns I remember seeing when he got drafted, which were just videos of Artie Burns getting absolutely destroyed by wide receivers blocking him. But yeah, back to Love's strength. He could use some more strength as well, so he doesn't get banged around at the top of his route as much. That would help him there as well. Something else he's going to struggle with is the burners of the league. Love's long speed is coming to question, and he's going to demand help over the top against the faster guys in the league because he just won't be able to keep up. Last 2 things I have to say are that his number of pass breakups in 2018 are kind of inflated, as half of them came in the last 2 games. And also, he's better suited for defending the boundaries than being a field corner. He probably wouldn't be able to operate the slot well, that being said. So that's something to consider. So an AFC director of personnel said this before his combine: the only thing we're going to worry about with him is that speed. I can't imagine him breaking a 4.5, and that number could be closer to 4.55, which is a concern because he's not a big physical guy. And that ended up being exactly correct. Love ran a 4.54, and it really hurts him because he is not speedy or strong. He just happens to be one of the best coverage corners in this draft. This is drawing him comparisons to A.J. Boye of the Jaguars. I think that's a perfect comparison for him with what he offers, as Boye isn't the strongest or speediest, but his coverage is just really good. So personally, I think Love is going to be an early day 2 corner that goes somewhere in the second round. He just lacks the strength and speed to be a first rounder, but I don't think he falls out of the second round either because his coverage abilities are just so good. So again, this was Love out of Notre Dame. Let's hear about Justin Lane.
Justin Lane, another, again, you'll notice a theme here, another big cornerback standing at 6'2" and 192 pounds. The junior from Michigan State. He was actually an Ohio receiver at Ohio, former All-Ohio receiver. He was moved to cornerback midway through his freshman season and started 5 of his final 7 games at cornerback that year, finishing with 18 tackles and 1 interception, which was a pick 6. Became a starter in 2017, finished with 40 tackles, 1 pick, and 8 pass breakups, and then last year, his junior season, he was a second-team All-Big Ten selection in 12 starts with 72 tackles, 2.5 for loss, 1 pick, and 15 pass breakups, which was top 10 in the nation. I watched his games against Ohio State and Michigan this year. Important to note, he lined up as a receiver on several plays against Michigan. I had to pause for a second and figure out exactly what was going on because I was confused. He did line up at receiver. So, again, another physical cornerback that's big. Justin Lane has long arms and a big frame. And a former receiver, he adds another dynamic as a cover corner where he has a good understanding of the passing game from an offensive perspective with experience adjusting to route combinations and is a good pattern matcher. He has quick hips for someone his size, he changes direction quickly, and he's a good man cover cornerback. He sticks to his man, and especially on curl routes, he'll finish with a strong tackle. He's rarely caught out of position and doesn't panic when his back is to the quarterback. He doesn't clutch and grab like Greedy Williams and some of the other guys that I have on my prospect list here. One thing that he does do very nicely, certainly better than Greedy Williams, is he'll attack receiver screens with ferocity and closes on his target quickly. Another good press man corner. He makes life difficult for opposing receivers and usually likes to keep them within arm's length. And his 11 pass breakups over his last 5 games shows that he is trending upwards. He made a lot of plays on the ball in college, and despite not having a ton of interceptions, he can still break up the ball, which is something that we didn't see from the Steelers' defensive backs much at all last season. He takes good pursuit angles and can hit hard when he wants to. Unfortunately, not everything is great with Justin Layne, as is the case with any player, and according to Lance Zierlein of NFL.com, Justin Layne really just doesn't have great demeanor on his tape. I wish he would elaborate a little more on that because I wasn't exactly sure what he meant by that, but I figured I should mention that. Justin Layne is strong but could stand to get stronger at under 200 pounds. Bigger receivers, just like Greedy Williams' case, he's going to get pushed around by them. So his biggest strength, being his size, is not going to play much of a factor in that case. Justin Layne rarely played zone coverage in college. Michigan State ran almost exclusively man coverage, and he really didn't look comfortable in zone. He made reads, but wasn't in the correct position more often than not and didn't adjust well. His long speed is also a problem. He posted a 4.5, which was just average amongst cornerbacks at the combine, and was beaten twice on 2 deep passes over the 2 games I watched, and they didn't burn him because they weren't completed. But it's clear that if you can get past Justin Layne, he's not going to catch you. He doesn't have the afterburners to catch you after you've gotten past him. Justin Layne blitzed a couple times in the games I saw. He's just not very good at it. He hesitates when you should be more aggressive. He just kind of waited for the quarterback to make a move, and, really, you just got to go get him. He allowed several inside releases against Michigan and press man, which is kind of confusing because I would think that's not what you would want. You'd prefer an outside release, but instead, he allowed several inside releases, and this is another concerning thing. He only had 1 interception per season, and although he had a lot of pass breakups, those interceptions don't match those good pass breakup numbers. And he doesn't fight through blocks very well, so he can still get taken out of the play, which is disappointing for someone his size, and he's a non-factor in the run game, usually due to effort, but technique is also an issue too. He likes to attack receivers on the boundary, but won't play in the run game, which is, again, frustrating. So there are coverage traits to like with Justin Layne. He's got good transitions. He has the size and length, but he's lacking speed. And the ball skills are interesting because he does have a lot of pass breakups, but the lack of interceptions are a cause for concern, in my opinion. He could fit in many different defenses, but in my opinion, Justin Layne is best served as a press man cornerback, and he's considered by many to be a tier or 2 below the top cornerbacks in this draft. That would have him going sometime in day 2. I think he could even be possibly an early day 3 selection. I think the top end speed here is what's really holding him back. I'd expect him to be gone sometime between the 3rd and 4th round. I think he's a decent player, but I think there are limitations in his game that are going to cause some teams to balk at him, and I don't really know exactly how much upside he has. If he can translate that little ball production as far as interceptions go into something more, that'll be nice to see, but I'm not holding my breath for that. So at the end of the day, Justin Layne has some nice pieces, but he's more limited than Greedy Williams, and he doesn't... His benefits that are better than what Greedy Williams provides aren't good enough to make him higher than what's likely a day 2 or day 3 selection. So Justin Layne, he's a good player, but I'm not sure he's worth more than a mid-round pick at this point. That being said, let's hear about a guy with personally my favorite name in the entire draft, a guy that looks like he's straight out of Key and Peele from the East-West Bowl, is Rock Ya-Sin from Temple.
Well, yes, he is 6 foot and 192 pounds. He is kind of the opposite of all the other guys I looked at it in terms of how they came out of college. Abdurrahman Ya-Sin is his full name. He goes by Rock Ya-Sin, was not highly recruited coming out of high school like the other prospects I looked at. He was a 2-time All-Region football pick and 2-time state champion wrestler coming out of high school and decided to sign with Presbyterian College. He played there in 11 games as a true freshman, starting 2 of those games and getting 15 tackles and 2 pass breakups. The next season, he got to start 11 games in his sophomore season, getting 31 tackles, 2 for a loss, and 9 pass breakups. In 2017 is where he really started getting recognized as he became a first-team All-Big South performer for making 45 tackles, getting 5 interceptions, and making 8 pass breakups in 11 starts. For his senior season, he transferred to Temple and proved he had what it took to excel at the FBS level. He was a first-team All-American Athletic Conference selection as a senior, leading Temple with 12 pass breakups while also having 47 tackles, 2 for a loss, and 2 picks. He could have had even better stats, but he chose not to play in Temple's bowl game to get ready for the NFL draft. So, Yasin is a guy scouts like for his stature and how quickly he rose in the ranks at Temple. He's really long with carved-up physique, and he possesses a lot of strength for a cornerback, having benched 18 reps at the Combine, which tied for the second most. Coaches over at Temple loved him just after a few months at Temple, and he was awarded the number 6 in his time there. And I found out a single-digit number at Temple represents their 9 toughest players. If you get a single-digit number, apparently, that means you're one of the toughest players. I didn't know that. That might be an all-school thing, and I might be sounding real dumb, but I didn't know that, and it said it in one of his reviews, so that's just something to consider. So Yasin was respected pretty quickly. Now, let's get into his actual play. And one of my favorite things about Yasin is that he's actually helpful in run support. With his strength, he isn't blocked as easy and has shown willingness to get in and make some tackles and run support. So that's always a plus. Also coming with his strength, he can lay into guys pretty hard if he wants to and could even improve it some more if he adds more strength. Then he has the traits to play either press man or off man if necessary. Moving along, he is light in his back pedal and has good foot quickness to be able to mirror receiver's release really well. Even if he does get beat, he has decent closing burst and aggressive hands that help him attack throws. Last thing I'll say is that he has a lot of upside with the potential for extended mirroring and lots of room to improve his technique. So, as you just heard me say, I ended off the positive saying that he has a lot of room to improve his technique, and really that could be viewed as a negative because his technique needs a lot more work. For starters, in press coverage, he's not as disruptive as he could be and gets turned around due to early hip declarations. Then his tackling needs some work as well. He's kind of a drag tackler, but really his tackling is inconsistent. He's going to need to work with an NFL coach to try and tighten it up. Speaking of being inconsistent, he struggles to stay in phase against verticals on a consistent basis, and he also struggles to maintain proper leverage as well. Then while he's actually faster than both Byron Murphy and Julian Love, he still doesn't have great long speed, just average. But opposed to Murphy and Love, who have something to make up for their speed, Yasin doesn't really have that, as his field awareness isn't where it should be, so he's not good at predicting routes and such. He also delays in his transitional speed, and you saw it at the Combine. Like I told you, every single one of my prospects had a bad Combine, and so to make up for his second best bench press, he had the second worst 3-cone drill time. So he evened it out that way. Last thing I'll say is he has a tendency to grab and face guard rather than trying to turn and locate the ball. So really, Rocky Sin is a raw player with a lot of upside, sort of like Artie Burns was, but they're not similar players other than they were a bit raw coming out. According to an AFC secondary coach, Rocky Sin is the type of guy scouts love, and that he's the type of guy you want your GM to draft because he has a possibility to take a big leap after getting some coaching and technique to go along with his physical tools. Had Steelers not just hired Terrell Austin, I would have thought this could have been a member of the Steelers organization with how Steelers have drafted defensive backs in the past few years. We saw Steelers reach on both Terrell Edmonds and Artie Burns, and Rocky Sin could be the next as he has been climbing draft boards as of late. I even saw him in a mock draft that had him as the only corner going in the first round. I think the media is doing a little bit too much hyping, though. Similar to how Dwayne Haskins kind of got hyped, and now his stock has fallen back down. I think Rocky Sin will be an early second rounder. I could see him fall into the late second, though. I can't picture him being the first rounder. It'd be a reach. But I mean, we've seen teams do this before. We've seen the Steelers do this before just last year. So it wouldn't be the first time for anything. So that was Rocky Sin out of Temple. Let's hear about your next prospect.
David Long, and it's important to note that there are 2 David Longs eligible in this draft. You've got the linebacker from West Virginia, who I'm sure we'll be talking about in the next couple weeks. And you've got the cornerback from Michigan, a junior standing at 5'11" and 196 pounds. He had the top 3-cone drill and 20-yard shuttle times, posting a sub 4-second 20-yard shuttle time, which was interesting to note. David Long, I saw his games against Michigan State and Ohio State from this past season. He was a 4-star recruit and top 100 prospect in high school, started 13 games as a sophomore, made 21 tackles, 2 interceptions, and had 6 pass breakups. He started 13 games last season, had 1 interception, was named first team All Big Ten, and had 17 tackles. And also interesting to note, Justin Lane, the prospect I just most recently talked about, in his game against Michigan, he lined up at wide receiver. Well, he was covered by none other than David Long several times in that game, so that was kind of interesting to see those two guys going at it. David Long, unlike Justin Lane, is not very tall. He was rarely targeted in college, though, because he was so positionally sound. He is a physical player at the line of scrimmage. He loves to get in the wide receiver's face and has excellent jams, maybe the best of any cornerback I looked at today. He's patient at the line of scrimmage and waits for the receiver to show his hand, and plays with good speed and quickness, has a razor-sharp focus, and watches the receiver intently, waiting for him to make his break. Long has the ability to run stride for stride with faster receivers in college, unlike someone like Justin Lane, and was rarely caught off balance with changes of direction, was able to quickly change pace effortlessly. Justin Lane doesn't have a ton of experience in zone, but when he was asked to play zone, he was very capable of it. The 62 points that Ohio State scored in their win over Michigan this year had very little to do with David Long and his performance. As a matter of fact, David Long had exited the game in the first minute of the second half, and from that point on, Ohio State only scored 38 of those 62 points. So most of the points came after Long left the game with an injury, and he had only been responsible, in my opinion, with 2 negative plays at that point, one of them being a defensive pass interference, which in college, remember, is only a 15-yard penalty, and the other was 1 other catch. He also had a pass breakup in that game, which is why I was able to write down that he had strong arms and is able to rake the ball away from receivers. He did that in a crossing route against Ohio State. And he's also played in the slot, and he might need to do that more often going forward, but it's nice to be versatile as he is. Unfortunately, the big thing you're going to notice with David Long is, the 17 tackles I mentioned his senior season. Yes, he did play a lot and only had 17 tackles this year. He makes Justin Lane and Greedy Williams look like legit run stoppers. 17 tackles in 13 starts is hard to do for all the wrong reasons. Now, granted, a lot of it is because he was playing almost exclusively man coverage with his back to the ball, but besides that, he was completely disinterested in making tackles, and his technique left a lot to be desired whenever he was asked to. And because David Long was rarely targeted in the passing game, he doesn't have a high rate of production, which doesn't bode well at the next level because Long is an undersized outside corner. At only 5'11", if he wants to stay at that position, it's going to have to be in the right defensive system, because if he's asked to do too much, his limitations are really going to hurt teams. He's going to be a liability. So I have a feeling wherever he goes, most likely he's going to get moved to the slot. And, I just don't know how he's going to produce in the slot, because he has played, but he hasn't played a ton. Really he's just a question mark at the end of the day. His play down the field gets worse when you go deeper and deeper down the field. He clutches and grabs more, and he doesn't have a great closing burst. He was also called multiple times for defensive pass interference in the games that I saw. So really, David Long, another speedy, quick, and technically sound cornerback. He is smaller compared to the other 2 cornerbacks I've looked at first, but he loves to play press coverage, and he's good at it. And he has some tools to succeed, but at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is he's likely going to have to be moved to the slot, and we really don't know how he's going to perform there. And even if you can keep him on the outside, what's to say that he was that good? Because he wasn't thrown at very much, which granted could be a case of they didn't want to test him because they knew that he could, he had good coverage, but at the same time, it's hard to tell until you've seen a good sample size, and we just really haven't seen that with him. And I personally hate the run defense that he has. I mean, not 17 tackles in 13 games is insanity. I just think that's crazy. I would not want this guy on my team because I feel as though having him on the field is as bad as not having an extra defender on the field against the run. It's like having 10 defenders trying to stop the run instead of 11. So that disgusts me personally, but it's not to say there aren't things to like about him. I think he is a late day 2, probably more likely an early to mid day 3 selection. There are things to like, but he does, again, have his limitations, as I will be continuing to say with these cornerbacks. So that was David Long from Michigan, not from West Virginia. Let's hear a little bit about Trayvon Mullen.
Well, he's from Clemson. He's 6'1" and 199 pounds. And he's the first cousin of Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson. So wouldn't that be cool for a family rivalry in the AFC North? He came out of high school as a second-team All-American and was regarded as a top 100 recruit nationally as a receiver in his senior year in high school. He chose Clemson, was converted to a defensive back, and played as a reserve on special teams coverage units in his freshman season, getting 15 tackles and 1 pass breakup. Mullen took a step forward the next season, starting 12 of 13 games and garnering honorable mention of all ACC accolades for his 42 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 7 pass breakups. In Clemson's 2018 championship season, Mullins, I did it. I just did it. I don't know why. I always want to call him Mullins. Mullen earned himself second-team all-conference honors, starting 14 of 15 games and getting 37 tackles, 4 for loss, and an interception and 4 pass breakups. But probably more importantly, he was named the title game defensive MVP for his 6 tackles, a sack, interception, and forced fumble that helped keep Alabama's offense at bay in the second half. After that performance, it was very understandable why he decided to forego his senior season and leave a national champion and a defensive MVP. So, Mullen is the tallest prospect I'm looking at. Is just pretty tall in general for a cornerback, and he also has long limbs. But I want to talk about his statistics for a little bit. Through his entire college career, he allowed no touchdowns and less than 300 yards total. Just think about that. Do the math here. He started in 26 games and played in 28 in his last 2 seasons, also adding some time as a reserve when he was a freshman. That means he was averaging giving up less than 12 yards receiving per game. That's impressive no matter how you look at it, especially when this man went up against Alabama in the national championship. He doesn't play in the scrub division either. It's just crazy. Really, though, you watch his tape, and man just never gets targeted. I saw him get targeted once against Pitt, like literally just once, and it was a super dangerous throw. Analyst Len Zerlin thinks he's a rep as a rep for offenses, so they don't target him. Offenses appear to avoid targeting him. So now let's get into what he actually does well. I think the best thing about him is he's rarely been beaten down the field while in Clemson's scheme. With his decent speed and great height, it's not easy to get behind him and get some separation. He plays with some fast feet and rapid acceleration to be able to chase guys quickly out of transition and can use that and his looseness when he plays to recover after making a coverage mistake, which he didn't actually make a lot of coverage mistakes. When quarterbacks have targeted him, you can see he can body receivers up to crowd the catch point, and he can strike opponents with jarring, quick set hits if need be. Last thing I will say is he has really good lateral speed and lateral quickness, and also acceleration as well as and with those 2 things combined, he can mirror a receiver's release pretty well. Now, something that I think is stupid, but we'll pass the message along anyway, is that people are worried about Mullen's meager ball production. I don't understand how after several websites and analysts describe Mullen as a guy that doesn't get targeted much, they could worry about something like that. A little different, as they're not the same caliber player coming out, but Browns cornerback Denzel Ward had the same worry coming out. He didn't get many interceptions, and we saw what he did game 1. So I think that is a stupid thing to look at when you're just such a good cornerback that people aren't throwing your way. But I just wanted to let you guys know that this is apparently a worry. There's a worry about his limited ball production. But now into some real problems, at least problems that I deem real. I think he could do with some more work on his lower body. It's only really slightly built. I think he could do with a little bit more muscle there. It may help with his tackling. As of right now, he is a grab and drag tackler. He's going to get himself hurt because he drops his head into impact. With some muscle and NFL coaching, he might be able to change it up, but right now his tackling is just not good. Then, when he's in coverage, I notice he gets thrown off by more complex routes a lot. Those are the ones he struggles to stay glued to mostly. Another reason he will sometimes lose his man is he has a below average balance at base while sitting in coverage. I saw him tumble a few times in a couple games. It didn't always lead to a bad play, but NFL quarterbacks are going to take advantage of it more than college quarterbacks, so it's going to be a bigger worry once he gets to the next level. Then I feel like his instincts are just average, and he doesn't watch the quarterback to get some insight into what's happening as much as he should. I think it'd have led him to panic at times, getting jumpy and inefficient with his feet. Last thing I have to say is he can be slow to sort through bunch releases. But Mullen has been compared to Kevin Johnson, the former first-round pick of the Texans, and I disagree, but I don't really have a better comparison to offer. Mullen is just Mullen to me. I think if he can just get his lower body strength up and improve his tackling, Mullen will be a great number 2 cornerback. I don't exactly see him as covering the top guys, but I really do see him excelling as a great complementary cornerback too, especially if he's held out of play for a little while. I didn't really mention it much, but Mullen also played on special teams on coverage units, so he offers that as well, and I believe with what he has to offer, he's a late round 2 or early round 3 guy. But I like what I see, so I wouldn't be surprised if he went in the mid-second round either. So that was Trayvon Mullen out of Clemson. Let's hear about your next prospect.
Mike Jackson, not Michael Jackson, Mike Jackson from Miami, a senior at 6'1" and 210 pounds. I watched his games against LSU and Florida State. A former 4-star recruit from Birmingham, played in 4 games as a freshman, then 7 as a sophomore. Then finally got into the starting lineup his junior season, starting 10 of 13 games, finishing with 4 interceptions, which tied for the team lead. Added in 5 pass breakups, and 3 of his 43 tackles were for a loss. And then last year, as an honorable All-ACC mention, he had 13 starts with 42 tackles, 3.5 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks, and 6 pass breakups, but no interceptions. So Mike Jackson, again, another large cornerback that has good length, another physical jammer. He slows down receivers at the start of the play effectively, and the loss against LSU he was not responsible for. He was directly responsible for up to 3 points in that game from what I saw. He has good route recognition and reads from his zone. He plays a decent amount of zone coverage, but will also play press man, so there was a good mix there. He likes to challenge throws near the sideline. He likes to defend the inside, so he'll make quarterbacks try to throw it over him and make the receiver make a tough catch. He's a quality blitzer from the outside, the best blitzer I looked at pre-draft here. And probably the only cornerback I looked at that was not only capable of defending the run, but was willing to as well, showing good technique and had good run fits. He also played well on special teams, has the skill set with good strength to play square to the receiver, and can actually probably, according to Lance Zierlein, move to safety in the future, even rolled to the safety position at times when a receiver was in motion. They were running zone defense, and he actually lined up as a linebacker twice against Texas A&M. Mike Jackson, though, has his limitations. His footwork is not very good. His off-man coverage isn't very good. He only succeeds with press-man coverage or off-zone. He has tight hips, which make for slow transitions. He doesn't stay with quick receivers, and he's a scheme-dependent guy. Teams are going to have to likely move him to safety to open up more with him, and that's always a question mark as to whether or not he'll actually be good at safety. Mike Jackson's long speed isn't great, and he doesn't have a good closing burst, similar to Justin Lane, and he doesn't do a great job of tracking the ball or finding it when his back is to the quarterback, similarly to David Long. At the end of the day, I really did like what I saw from Mike Jackson from a run defender and a physicality standpoint, but in today's quick rhythm football, Jackson could struggle to cover short routes when matched up against quicker receivers, and he's just not strong enough in zone coverage to be a starter there either. He's going to have to be, again, a scheme-dependent guy to cover up his deficiencies, and I think he traditionally would be closer to what the Steelers typically take in the draft. He does have decent ball production and skills, but not enough to make you think he's going to be a great find. I think Jackson's going to be a mid-day 3 selection, and I think these types of cornerbacks are becoming less and less common, and the way the Steelers' defense has been regarding drafting cornerbacks, I think they're trying to get away from this type of player, at least this year. So I think Mike Jackson is an unlikely find for the Steelers, but at the end of the day, he's likely going to be a 5th or 6th, maybe even a 7th round pick. But I have seen him also listed as the number 10 cornerback, according to thedraftnetwork.com. He was listed as the number 10 cornerback. So, again, I don't really know. I had a lot of trouble finding information on some of these guys, too. I thought he was a midday 3 pick, possibly a late one, but who knows? Maybe he could be earlier, too. There are things to like, there, to be sure, but maybe I'm just thinking in terms of what the Steelers are thinking too much. But, I'm certainly not an expert at all. So your 5th and final prospect, DeAndre Baker out of Georgia. I heard a lot of people connecting him to Pittsburgh. Are those rumors something that we should be excited about?
I actually don't think so because I might be wrong on this, but typically the first-round draft pick is a pick that where Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin attended their pro day, and I don't think that they both attended Georgia's pro day. So I don't think it's a good idea to link them, but I looked at him anyway. So he's 5'11" and 193 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit and all-state track athlete for Miami Northwestern High School before deciding on Georgia as his college of choice. In his freshman season, he played in 11 games and made 1 tackle, but really introduced himself as a sophomore. In the next season, he started 7 of 12 games for the Bulldogs, getting 31 tackles, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, and 5 other pass breakups. He continued improving in his junior season, earning himself second-team All-SEC honors after starting in 14 of the 15 games he played in, getting 44 tackles, 3 picks, and 9 pass breakups. One of the picks came in the national championship game against Alabama, so it was a big deal. He saved the very best for... Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I meant to correct that. He didn't. He dropped that. He dropped that pick, but he made a big pass breakup. He saved the very best for last, where he won the Jim Thorpe Award as the nation's best defensive back. He also garnered first-team All-SEC honors, obviously, for starting 13 games, recording 40 tackles, 2 picks, and a team-leading 10 pass breakups in his last season before declaring for the draft. So, similar to how I started with Mullen, I want to talk about some stats first. For starters, Baker has allowed no touchdowns and has had 5 interceptions since 2017. And then the longest catch he gave up was 17 yards, tied for second best in the entire FBS for corners with Rock Ya-Sin. Those are both impressive feats in the conference he's in, so that's just something to consider. Now, the fact of the matter is this: DeAndre Baker is the best coverage corner in this draft. There are several things that play into this. For starters, he has amazing football IQ and field awareness, constantly showing to be a leader on Georgia's defense by always communicating before the play. But he's just plays so confident, especially in press coverage. I mean, he should. With his high football IQ, all he has to do is keep up with his opponent, and he does a really good job at using his foot quickness to stay glued to his opponents early on while simultaneously matching their route speed to stay against them. Even if he's against the burner, he may not be the fastest, but his play speed is quite impressive because he ran a 4.52 at the combine, which isn't great, but he just got such a good burst to close in, and he's so quick to turn and sprint when he needs to that you wouldn't even know his forward time isn't the greatest. He also slows his opponent down by crowding the release point to slow the route timing, so it makes him look better as well because he just has a good feeling for when the release is coming and can match it effectively. Now, he didn't get targeted much, as you really heard me say for most of my cornerbacks now, but when he's targeted, it's simply a mistake. He plays the edge to challenge throws and has some good timing on jump balls, which allowed him to get some of his interceptions. He's also aggressive at the catch point, raking and swiping to get the ball jarred out. So there's that. Last thing I'll say is he's a willing open field tackler, but transitioning to the other side real quickly, I may have said willing, but being willing tackler doesn't make you a good one. Matter of fact, Baker was probably the worst tackler I looked at. I just wasn't happy watching his tape against Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky, watching him when he had to tackle. It was just very ineffective. I think it's actually a product of him not having to tackle that much in coverage since he hardly got beat. So it's, in a way, it's hurt him that he's so good in coverage because he hasn't had the practice to get those tackles in, but still, he needs to definitely work on his tackling with an NFL coach. Similar to Mullen, he actually needs some strength as well, which could help his tackling, but he also needs the strength to help disengage from blocks to help in run support as well. I mean, his strength isn't bad. It's just average for the NFL level, so he could do it more. Now, something he needs help with is how grabby he gets. Against complex routes, he starts panicking and grabbing. And while his physicality didn't get him in much trouble at the college level, in the pros he's going to be flagged a lot more for that kind of stuff. Speaking of struggles once in the NFL, he is small by NFL standards, and there are concerns with him matching up against big NFL receivers on the outside because of it. Now, just a few other things. He plays a little too tall out in space. He can be inconsistent at reading a quarterback's eyes to get an early jump on throws. And then finally, he dropped a bunch of potential takeaways, like the one against Alabama, which probably would have stopped Alabama from coming back. So Baker's compared to a pretty good cornerback in Asante Samuel, a borderline Hall of Famer, so that's not a bad comparison for him. But I actually see a slightly faster Casey Hayward. Casey Hayward was the same height and around the same weight, and they're both great coverage corners. I would say that's a better fit for him, even though Casey Hayward was actually on the stronger side. But anyhow, as for Baker, I think he could do with some more strength. I feel like if he got like 18 reps at the combine, like Rocky Sin, he would be the first corner coming off the board, without a doubt. But his tackling to me is a big issue, and I really think it's because of his strength. So I think Baker will be the third cornerback off the board, coming off in either late first round or early second round, because his coverage is excellent, but his tackling left me desiring more. And there are questions about whether his coverage could stack up against bigger guys in the NFL. So he's going to be going somewhere between the late first round to mid-second round, in my opinion. So that was DeAndre Baker out of Georgia. Who's your fifth and final prospect?
Derek Beatty from Kentucky. There's a couple interesting Kentucky prospects up for the NFL draft this year. But I'm talking about Derek Beatty. He's, again, another big cornerback standing at 6'2" and 197 pounds. He is a senior, and I watched his games against Florida this year and Texas A&M. From Florida, he was a first-team All-Florida player in high school, became a starter as a true freshman in 2015, starting the final 4 games of that season, and then became the full-time starter in 2016, starting 13 games and tying for the team lead with 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and 42 tackles, then started 12 of the next 13 games in each of the next 2 seasons. In 2017, he had 49 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 9 pass breakups, and then last season he had 38 tackles, 1 interception, and 7 more pass breakups. So again, another guy you're going to notice, good size for that cornerback position. A 3-year starter at Kentucky. I was a talented defensive backfield, as I mentioned, and he started games in all 4 collegiate seasons. Beatty was tested with a deep shot on the first play of the game against Florida and broke up the pass. And again, another guy that plays with a good mix of man and zone coverage. He did a great job pattern matching with his teammates on a goal line play out of the trips bunch formation with seamless transition. And he has good reads in zone coverage. He watches the quarterback and makes determinations on what to do from that point, and he was usually pretty quick in doing so as well. Against Texas A&M, he forced a fumble that was scooped up and returned for the game-tying score, has good back pedal speed, and has fluid movement in his back pedal. He has good height and positioning that makes it difficult to drop the ball over top of him on fade routes, and Beatty can cover receivers in off-man coverage somewhat effectively, which was not the case for most of the guys I looked at. Derek Beatty does a good job in high-pointing the ball and is a hard hitter who likes to punish receivers coming across the middle of the field. Derek Beatty, though, he is the last ranked prospect I've looked at in terms of draft position for a few reasons, though. He doesn't have makeup speed to recover when he's beaten up clean off the line of scrimmage. This was seen clearly in the East-West Shrine game. He has shorter arms for a cornerback his size, which kind of negates the good things about him being tall and, a relatively strong guy. So press man coverage is going to become more difficult when he gets to the NFL level, and he allows too many contested catches against him. His transitions also are not great. He loses a step against receivers far too often on tape, especially when he has to transition his back pedal to a sprint or normal run. The receiver will blow by him. So fast receivers are going to be a nightmare for him. He's another guy that doesn't do a good job of getting his head around to find the football, and although he's not completely unwilling to support the run defense, he does struggle to assist just because of poor technique, and he lacks pop as well against running backs. So Derek Beatty, he has good measurables, but that's offset when you, in fact, his shorter arms and his inconsistent ball production. He has a decent amount of pass breakups, but his interception count was kind of all over the place. His long speed and poor change of direction ability are going to hurt his draft stock, and that's so key in the short route defending these days. But he has solid ball skills, good physicality, and decent route recognition and zone coverage. He's not a complete liability, but there's really concern about how much upside he really has. I think Derek Beatty's a solid player, but he's not going to be anything more than a mid to most likely a late day 3 selection, possibly an undrafted free agent. So that was Derek Beatty out of Kentucky. So now we've looked at all 10 of our prospects, Austin. As we now typically do, let's talk about all 5 of them and how you rank them personally based on how you think they would best fit with the Steelers.
Well, number 1, I have Rocky Sin. He may not be my personal favorite corner, but it's the exact kind of corner the Steelers look for in a defensive back, for better or worse. They like those developmental guys with a lot of potential. See Terrell Edmonds and Artie Burns. If I were to pick based on how I like him, he would be lower, but I do think he is probably going to be the most he's going to be the most gritty corner with the most strength available for the Steelers. And with his developmental traits, I feel like the Steelers like him the most. Just to clarify, though, if I were to pick based on how I rank them, Rocky Sin is going to move down to number, I believe, 5. Yeah, he's going to go down to 5. 4. I'm sorry. But regardless, after that, I have Trayvon Mullen. Mullen is next. I like him a lot because the Steelers could possibly get him in the 3rd round. They don't necessarily need a corner that can start this year, and I think Mullen would do great getting a redshirt season in before he actually gets a start. He also offers special teams ability as well. So for the price tag, I like developing him, and I like how tall he is and such. So I think he could be a good cornerback number 2 going forward. So I liked Mullen a lot. Then after him came Byron Murphy. I wanted to be more in love with Murphy than I was, as he was my first guess for who I would like the most before I was done looking at prospects. But I just don't know. For a first-round pick, I didn't feel like he was as complete as he should be. I was hoping since he was coming out of his sophomore year, he'd be at least be younger, but he's actually 21, just like my other prospects, and he isn't even the youngest. I guess that makes sense why he chose to come out his sophomore year, as he's already a bit older, but still. I still do like him, though. I said that. Don't get me wrong. He's a ball hawk without a doubt, and that's what the Steelers need more than anything. I don't know, though. If there isn't a good inside linebacker at 20 left, I would consider trading back first and see if Murphy falls to the end of the round, as he's still a gamble, and he would be the slowest cornerback drafted in the first round since at least 2013. So it's a big risk for me, and I wasn't the biggest fan. So I wouldn't even be worried if he wasn't there. If the Steelers traded back, I would be willing to let the Steelers reach on an inside linebacker that was probably going in the 2nd round instead. Because I don't know. I wasn't exactly sold on Byron Murphy being a first-round pick. But after that comes Julian Love. After looking at him, I really thought I was going to have him higher. I really thought he was going to be higher on my list, but I just couldn't. A lot of the corners I looked at were basically the same, and I loved his play. He's probably the 2nd and 3rd best cover corner in this draft, but the combination of his physicality, size, and speed were rough for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, man could break up all the passes in the world, so I still consider him a ball hawk, but I would have liked a few more interceptions from him. If he fell into the 3rd round, I would love him a lot more, but for likely a 2nd-round pick, it's really rough for me to rank him higher, and that leaves Baker for last. I still like him, but his tackling was really off-putting for me. I think that his coverage is going to be as good at the next level, and it's going to force him to have to tackle more. I just really hated watching him tackle. Again, Baker is probably the best coverage corner in this draft, but to me, for a guy that's a fringe first-round pick, I don't like the amount of development that is going to have to go into him with his tackling technique and his strength. So Baker ranks last for me because the Steelers would likely have to use their first-round pick on him and reach. And he's not a player I'd want to reach on. If the Steelers are going to reach on a position, I want it to be inside linebacker. So I just don't like Baker that much. So how do you rank your prospects up based on how they fit with the Steelers?
They're actually the exact order in which I presented them to you. So starting with Greedy Williams first, look, he's just the best cover guy I saw. He's got desire and physicality concerns, but his coverage traits are just too good for me to ignore, especially when you consider how inept the Steelers were at intercepting and deflecting passes last year. He could make an instant impact. He does have room to grow, but at the end of the day, I think the Steelers need to inject some talent and ball skills here, and Greedy Williams will provide that immediately. Second, I have Justin Lane. He's more of a physical and slower version of Greedy Williams, and he has the pass breakups to speak for him, but his long speed and just concerns about his tape, he just didn't jump out that much to me. His skills in press man coverage just weren't as good as Greedy Williams, so he's just not as complete of a player. Third, I have David Long. I liked his tape, but I'm nervous about how little he was targeted. And personally, I just hate it when guys don't try to help out in run defense. It might be different if I knew he could play on the outside for sure, but I'm not convinced at this point. And I mentioned that it was a pro that a good amount of Ohio State's points came against Michigan when he wasn't in the game. But they still scored 24 points and a half against Michigan. And yeah, you could say, he wasn't targeted, it wasn't his fault. But at the end of the day, I mean, what was he doing to change anything? He wasn't helping in the run game at all. And, the argument could be made that Ohio State didn't need to attack him. There wasn't a point. They were getting so much everywhere else. So, I mean, how much better was he really going to be? I don't know. These are all question marks. And I guess at the end of the day with Long, that's what he is to me. I don't know enough about him to know if he's going to be better than just an average player. Because, again, he's probably going to have to be a slot cornerback, and we haven't seen enough from him, in my opinion anyways, to know if he's going to be good at that. Fourth, I have Mike Jackson. Conventionally, he's closer to what the Steelers would typically want from a cornerback in the draft, but I think he has too many coverage issues, and while I love his ability to support the run, it isn't what I like and want. It's about what I think the Steelers would do and how well he would fit in terms of their draft strategy. I just don't think the Steelers need another player like Jackson this year. Finally, I have Derek Beatty. Knowing how awful the Steelers have been at drafting cornerbacks for the past 10 to 20 years, I don't want to see a 6th or 7th round pick used on Beatty. I don't hate his game, but I don't think he'd fit very well in Pittsburgh, and if you can get him as a free agent, I'd rather that than spend a draft pick on another cornerback just to watch him fail. I'd prefer an undrafted free agent. That's just my personal opinion. So, cornerback room next year, Austin, I'll jump right into it. You already know the starters, Hayden, Nelson, and Hilton in the slot. And the backups, I have a draft pick coming in, plus Cameron Sutton and Artie Burns. I had Brian Allen there, but since Allen has already been cut before from the opening day roster, I think Artie Burns is going to sneak in over Brian Allen, just to give the pedigree guy one more chance.
I actually agree with you full-heartedly. I think that Brian Allen's going to be the first one to go, but it's going to be close because Artie Burns cost more, but it's really, the difference isn't that big. Artie Burns is going to be paid $3 million this year, and it's not going to save them that much to just cut him. So I think that Artie Burns does stay for one more year, while Brian Allen gets cut, and it's going to be Cameron Sutton and the draft pick as all the backups, while the starters are exactly the same as you had them. I think that's how it's going to be, unless due to injury. I can't see anything else.
All right, that'll wrap things up for today's episode. The NFL Draft is 2 weeks from tomorrow, Austin. We are now recording in the middle of Wednesday morning, and the draft is 2 weeks from tomorrow. So we got a few more episodes to get in. Edge Defenders will be coming up next. If you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. We will answer your questions on our next show if you do. And feel free, as always, to check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you so much again for joining me today and talking Steelers football and cornerbacks today. And as I said, we'll be talking about edge defenders next. As always, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.